How you doing?
Good. Can we hit yourself?
Well, everybody said, oh, I don't need one.
Did you hear about this guy? I sent you the email.
I have one.
Good morning, you guys on there, he says, tell me where you live.
I still have a travel trailer. We need to talk after this because I didn't get a word of what you said. You're a
Would everybody please
These people are gonna leave, they're gonna say, what a rowdy bunch.
I can't whistle like I did before.
Okay. Yeah, I
There's a big one on leaking.
Okay, everybody seated. I've got some announcements to make before we get started. These are some of the events we have coming up that I hope people will come out and join us. I've got volunteer sheets on the back table for the cleanup that we're going to be doing, the neighborhood cleanup with the dumpsters. So if you want to come out and help us with that cleanup, there's volunteer sheets back there. The first one is May 12th. It's the neighbor to neighbor, Betty's house. There's Betty. We're going over there on this coming Saturday. Then on Mother's Day, and I know a lot of you are doing things on Mother's Day, so I will excuse you. We have the breakfast at the VFW, and then we're going to go do the alley cleanup over by Bob's house. Then there's another neighborhood event on June 9th. June 9th. And then another neighborhood cleanup on June 16th. Now this is all on the agenda. So if you guys don't have an agenda, because I updated it, I'm sorry. And then there's our yard sale on July 21st, and we're still looking for donations. So anybody that has donations can get a hold of us, we'll come pick them up. Or our address is on the Google, if you go to Google neighborhood Lents neighborhood, you'll
We
see
have
our,
a storage unit, so you can bring them early and we
Yeah.
have storage for them.
yeah, because the gentleman that came last month with the storage, mini storage down there on 92nd, gave us 3 months of a storage unit.
Wow.
And then we have National Night Out, which is going to be up at the Mount Scott Community, the Mount Scott Church on August 7th. So now David can start the meeting. Does anyone want an agenda?
Well, thank you all for joining us at the May meeting of the Lents Neighborhood Livability Association. To start out, if you haven't voted already, there's still time to do that, and I'd recommend that you do it. I guess it's too late to tell you vote early and vote often, but
It's too late to mail them, yeah.
yeah, too late. Mine's already mailed and been accepted according to the little text message.
So you're not getting the junk mail anymore?
No.
Yeah, you will.
So tonight we have guest speakers, George Devendorf, Executive Director of Transition Project, Karen Kern, Senior Director of Substance Use Disorder Services, Clay Cooper, who's Senior Director of Social Enterprises and Employment Services, and Jay McIntyre, Chief Liaison for Clean Start with Central City Concerns, and Rich Newlands. I guess it's not here. So we'll start off with George Devendorf, who has 15 minutes to speak to us.
Great. Well, thanks very much. Thank you all for inviting us actually to come into your meeting tonight. I'm happy to talk about what my agency does. I'm also happy to try to respond to very specific questions that you all may have, and to the extent that I can be helpful in trying to respond to them, or others on this end of the room, be happy to do so. So I'm going to try to keep my remarks a little bit short and see where there is in the conversation.
And one thing, I'd like to remind everybody, it would be nice if you have questions, let's try to phrase it as a question so you can actually answer the question. I don't think you're going to convince anybody. It's your meeting, you can make a statement. But if we phrase it as a question, we're likely to learn more than one of us voicing our opinion as opposed to asking a question. So with that, I'll bring it
Thank you.
forward to you.
How many of you have heard of the organization I work for, Transition Projects? Say first. All right, fair number. The organization's about 50 years old. Next year we turn 50. And during those 50 years, we've really focused on more or less the same 3 types of activities. The first are activities designed to help people who are experiencing homelessness survive that homelessness. And what I mean by that are immediate services, including shelter, but also including day services through the day center, which is located above Clark Commons right down by the train station and the Greyhound station. That's a facility that's open every day of the year and includes really basic stuff. Toilets, showers, laundry machines, a place to get your mail, an address to use for mail, to connect to various services that my agency provides, but also services that our partner agencies like Central City Concern provide. In fact, jointly we run an acute care clinic out of that day center that can provide very immediate medical attention to folks who come in for one thing, want to get on a wait list for shelter, or want to check on an employment opportunity or something. And while they're there, we notice they've got a nasty looking gash or something that could use someone to look at. And so we're able to use that opportunity to get them in front of a medical professional very quickly and, if need be, referred on to higher levels of care. So those things together, really, I put in the same bucket of helping people survive this episode of homelessness that they may be going through. The second bucket is helping them get back into housing. It's really hard. We're in a red-hot housing market. You all know that. We share that in common with our West Coast cousins up and down the I-5 corridor. Can you hear me all right? Am I? Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm hard of hearing.
Okay. So, the West Coast is different than the rest of the country these days, and we should talk a little bit about that because there is something particular about the West Coast. It's not just Portland, but up and down the West Coast. So, housing is exceedingly difficult And really, if you wanted to try to find the central issue that animates any big city's homelessness situation these days, particularly on the West Coast, it's the housing market, right? So the lack of affordable housing is a primary cause of homelessness, and at the other end, it's the lack of affordable housing as a primary bottleneck or obstacle to helping people overcome and end their homelessness and get back into housing. It's pretty straightforward, right? Now, different folks have different challenges, challenges that perhaps cause them to fall into homelessness in the first place, and then definitely, in many cases, other challenges that come about while you're experiencing homelessness. It's a tough time in people's lives, particularly for women. Women who are living on the street face very specific challenges. Almost 100% of the women we work with report some form of sexual assault while they've been homeless. Many of them, their homelessness began with a domestic violence situation. So we have a lot of homeless women in Portland. About 38% of our overall population are women. The third bucket, I'm happy to come back again, but the third bucket that we really focus on is helping people be successful in housing once they're back in housing, right? So that means providing case management, follow-up support, and depending on their level of vulnerability or needs, more extensive supportive services to make sure they're successful in that housing, that they don't fall out of it again, don't recidivate and come back through the system again. And many folks do. And it makes it harder and harder each time. Each failed housing attempt makes it that much harder to come back around again. Right? So those are the three areas that we focus on. And I think the reason why I was probably invited to come speak to you all tonight is because we have been named as the likely operator of the foster shelter that's proposed for Foster at 61st. And the model that would be pursued there. How many of you have been following that by participating in the, all right, so there's following, yes. And some of you have been actually showing up for the foster steering group meetings? Yes? Okay, great. So you guys are probably familiar with a lot of the details. I'm happy to go into more of those details if that's of interest and if it's helpful. But I'll just note that when that shelter opens sometime next year, we're likely to be the operator of that shelter. So I absolutely could go on, but before I stop to see if you have specific questions, let me just back up a bit and mention that the national trend around homelessness, because I think it's important to put this phenomenon, this crisis, in a little bit of context. Since the turn of the millennium, homelessness in the United States has more or less been on a very slow but somewhat steady decline. Specifically since 2010, we've seen overall homelessness decrease nationally by 13%, and chronic homelessness, which is that toughest to solve for subset of homelessness, decreased by 27%.
I'm sorry, the statistic for the 27% was an increase in 20%?
Decrease.
A decrease.
Right.
It just doesn't look like it.
Well, you know, and on the West Coast, we've been seeing increases, right? And we also know that, again, in comparison to our brethren along this coast, it could be worse. We've had a 10% uptick in the last 2 years. And again, this is according to point-in-time counts. The point-in-time counts are always undercounts. That's the bad news. The good news is they're always undercounts, so as a relative measure, they're fairly useful for trends. And more or less all major cities in the US follow more or less the same methodology. So it could be worse. But what we learned from that is that over the last 2 years, we've seen a 10% uptick in number of people experiencing homelessness in Multnomah County and Portland. In Seattle, that number is about 16%. In LA, it's about 30%. In Oakland, in large part because they're right next door to you-know-who, 38% increase over the last 2 years. What sets us apart from having a slower rate of increase, is that we're the only major city along this coast to actually reduce the number of unsheltered homeless in our community. And we've done that because we have all invested at city and county level in expanding the number of publicly funded shelter beds that are out there. Now, let's be clear, shelter does not end anyone's homelessness. If you're in a shelter, you are still homeless. The goal is still the same, to get you into housing and help support you to be successful in that housing. But while you're homeless in a red-hot housing market, It's better to have shelter as an option to keep people safe, to keep people dry, and to ensure that we, the social service sector and communities, have a chance to engage with them, better understand what their needs look like, match them to services, okay, and help them along their path towards stabilizing, getting back into housing, and moving forward with their lives. So over the last 2 years, because of the investments I was mentioning, we've gone from a city that could provide 50% of our homeless population with shelter if they want it, to 60%. The national average closer to 70. But we've moved the needle on that scale, and we now have less people outside of shelter than inside shelter who are experiencing homelessness.
So your assertion is that all these people, the majority of them are homeless because of rent, because of high rent?
So it's a good question, and if I told you there was one simple answer